This video is intended for leaders, organizers, performers, anyone that's going to be in front of a crowd or managing or guiding a crowd, whether it's a march or a rally, an army or a protest. The group dynamics are the same no matter what the situation is, which is that you can understand it in 4 different elements or 4 different temperaments. With the water temperament, these are people that are going with the flow. They kind of lose their individuality. It's a sort of bulk or mass of most crowds, which is that you're in the crowd and you're going to react and act according to what the people next to you are doing, because you may not know what's going on. So you kind of default to your surroundings and those people to their surroundings. And so the water temperament is very momentum based. When everyone shifts in one direction, they go in that direction. That also means larger waves are harder to stop once that momentum is going. It's this sort of ebb and flow of the crowd. In the air temperament, these are people that are more vocal. They're very high energy. They're very motivated. And they're kind of an amping force. They can kind of amplify any of the other temperaments. They're rallying people up, but they're quick to run. They're not going to hold their ground when things go down. So they're in these excited states. They can also regather when the threat is gone, but they will scatter as soon as something goes down. In earth temperaments, you have the opposite. These are people that are very calm, collected, grounded, even stubborn. They're kind of just a bulk. They're sort of there and they're going to plant themselves, which means it's easy for them to get caught up, but they're also reliable in that they're going to do what they set out to do. They're just going to hold their ground and stay put. So they're a little bit slower to act and react, and they won't necessarily be as vocal. With the fire temperaments, these are people that are aggressive, whose passions are high, hot-headed, they're easily ignited, they're ready to be destructive, they have a lot to fight for, right? They're very fiery. The temperaments act exactly as you'd expect the elements to act, including interactions between them. If you have a bunch of air temperaments mixed with a bunch of fire temperaments, they're going to ignite those flames. They're going to fan that fire, and so people are going to be very aggressive, and it's going to get very chaotic very fast. Air temperament can also really push waves forward. It can create larger waves. It can really get that momentum going, which is also then very hard to stop. Air temperaments won't necessarily interact with earth temperaments very much. It's kind of just wind across it. It doesn't really do anything. But if earth temperaments are scattered, then it's easier to blow around. It's more like sand or loose soil, where it can kind of get subsumed by that element. So any temperament changes its composition based off of how much of that element is there. The more of a certain temperament you have, the more stable its element is. So the more people that are earth temperament, the less likely they're going to change their temperament throughout the day. The same is true for any of them. But that also means if you have only a small amount of a certain temperament, you can predict that they're likely going to be subsumed or combined into a different temperament if things get going. Now we get into the idea of formations, which is how you're positioning, how you're distributing these different elements based off of the kind of composition that you have in that crowd. For example, if you put earth temperaments all along the perimeter of that crowd, you're going to contain those people. You're going to keep them in bulk. That also means in the wrong situation, they're going to be trapped. So it depends on, do you need them to be able to scatter, or do you need them to be all together? And that will determine where you want to put these earth temperaments. Or maybe you want the earth temperaments to surround the air temperaments to stop them from leaving, so that you have this motivating force that's fanning the flames, keeping everyone hyped and high energy and keeping them moving, but you don't want them to scatter when it comes down to it. Or you want all the air temperaments to be in the front lines, and as soon as something happens, they're ready to break and run, and so the crowd is able to stay loose and keeps them from getting caught up. Or you put the earth temperaments in the front, or you put the fire temperaments in the front, and you stay aggressive and you stay ready to go. If you don't want to be aggressive, if you want to stay away from any engagement or conflict, maybe you put all the fire temperaments in the very back lines. It keeps the crowd surging forward. It keeps that fire lit under them, and so they stay moving. You can put fire temperaments and water temperaments together and create these sort of smoke screens. When things go down and fire ignites, they're going to scatter and spread everywhere. And water, doing what water does, which is follows what other people are doing, they're going to scatter in every direction. So you've created this huge plume of people who are running around everywhere causing chaos. That means you might be able to draw out the enemy. You might be able to waste their energy or distract them, and it gives you an opportunity to get people to escape or to have a flank or to simply move around or just drain the energy of people. All of these things a leader has to consider because that composition can make or break a crowd. Knowing where to position them, what the total ebb and flow, the rhythm and pulse of this crowd is. A leader has to be able to feel that. Even if the crowd is complete strangers, the leader has to learn how to feel it, how to navigate that, and how to lead them safely or to victory. That idea of wayfinding, of navigating and feeling that group consciousness, that's a whole other video that would have to be done for leaders specifically. A leader is also able to create a very basic chain of command instantaneously with no practice. What you do is you find people that you know and you make captains, and those captains are going to be in charge of a section or a group of people specifically. Now, if the crowd is really big, the captains have lieutenants who are then in charge of people or sections, and they report to the captain, and the captain reports to the leader. And so the leader needs to maintain that bigger picture, which is the elemental composition of the crowd, but also the goal of the crowd, what the enemy is doing, the layout of the terrain, the territory, the obstacles, the mood, and the atmosphere. They need to account for all of these factors, and they need to adjust accordingly. They need to guide and pathfind and keep everyone safe and together, but also ideally be able to win the day or find success. And that's a huge responsibility. And that's why people who are naturally charismatic or who are learning to be leaders or naturally leaders or simply in that position, you may be good at it, but there are kind of levels to it. And if you have some training, you're now able to access these different levels of strategy in organizing and getting a crowd moving and the layout of the crowd, the composition of their elements. Being able to recognize which elements you're working with and that people might change throughout the day or they might change from one event to the other. People may be more passionate about a certain thing or they may be more grounded or more calm, depending on the situation, depending on the day, and the leader has to be able to recognize this shift in mood. It depends on what the stakes are, what the enemy is, how high are passions, how much are people just there to make noise or go with the flow. A leader has to know all of this because if you want successful crowd work, if you want to build community, finding success in this elemental composition is going to be rewarding to all the individuals who kind of blend their consciousnesses together. That kind of thing is sort of like a school of fish or a flock of birds. There's this sort of exhilaration that comes from a successful group activity. A leader exists to read the ebb and flow, the pulse and rhythm of a crowd to guide and navigate to find the path of victory.